Welcome to the Maverick podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Rose. And as always, a big shout out to all the independent thinkers, the free spirits, and the Mavericks walking your unique path. Today, we're going to talk about something that is essential for life, something you do every single day and greatly contributes to your health and wellness. We're going to talk about the art of breathing well. My guest is Tess Graham. She's an Australian physiotherapist and a breathing educator with loads of experience in teaching people how to make their breathing better. And she's going to share with us how to recognize good breathing and how to change our breathing so that we're healthier. Please join me in welcoming Tess Graham.
Thank you, Kathy.
I'm so excited to have you today because this is an extremely important topic. And as somebody who has meditated for many years and talked about breathing, I'm really excited to talk to you about this. So if you could please tell us a little bit about how you became interested in breathing and tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, as a physiotherapist, breathing was always a big part of our work within a hospital setting, usually, but not outside a hospital setting. So not in private practice, but in hospital, we were working with people hospitalised for respiratory conditions and also working to get their lungs functioning well after surgery, particularly abdominal surgery. And I observed some things through that period that often their response to the traditional breathing exercises we gave them, which were deep breathing exercises and coughing exercises to clear their lungs, would make them dizzy or panicky. And in fact, when a physiotherapist entered a ward, because the wards were huge in those days, it was often like 10 people down one side, 10 down the other, and this murmur would come up, oh no, here comes the physio. So it wasn't always comfortable for them, but sounded like a good idea to clear the lungs and make sure they're expanded. So that got me thinking, because I never liked to provoke any negative response of discomfort, anxiety, panic, coughing, etc. And then I also worked with a lot of people with asthma, and that actually gave me a fear around asthma, because the ones who were coming in and out, I'd had asthma for a long time, was they, basically weren't ever expected to improve. They'd get over that acute event and then they'd come back. Then I gave birth to 3 children, and the first 2 of them developed asthma from the age of 3. So I did not want that life for them that I saw, and they became quite chronic. They got worse every year. So for 7 years, I researched asthma to try and find something to help them, because when I went to school, no one had asthma, and yet 2 of my 3 children had asthma. So it was through that 7 years of research that I found the work of a Russian doctor, Professor Konstantin Buteyko, who was a medical doctor but also a researcher, and he was a mechanic before he was a doctor. So he had a mechanic's way of thinking, fixing the underlying cause. And so it was through his discoveries and the method he created to return breathing to normal that I then thought, right, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, so I can help people get back to breathing as nature intended. And my children, of course, had a marvelous change from that. So basically it was the end of their asthma symptoms after they did the breathing course.
That's wonderful. And in fact, I was going to ask you what happened after you started working with them. How long did it take for them to have less asthma symptoms?
Straight away. Yeah, straight away. My son never had any symptoms. And once he started, my daughter had very, very few. So pretty well there was nothing left of it after 3 months. And they were able to come off all their medications.
So when you were working with your children, you were using the techniques from Professor Buteyko, but then you developed your own, right? You went beyond that?
Yes, I adapted from that by using my training, but also my clinical work in that. In basically, a lot of people have said that I should have been a teacher. that's what I do best, is to teach. So I adjusted the way it was taught, from, the way it evolved in Russia and here, but all the basic principles that the doctor discovered, they're all there. They're all based on known physiology. It's just how you teach them, and you find a pathway for each person to get through that.
So let's talk about what good breathing looks like and what are some of the basics and the essentials for this. And I ask you this because let me just preface this with something. When I first started to learn meditation techniques, and I learned a lot, and then I taught meditation techniques. Um, and there was an exercise we were doing led by the instructor of this particular lecture. And he wanted us to find our own perfect breathing rhythm and rate. And I was sitting next to somebody who was doing the exercise, and he was doing long, deep, noisy breaths. And of course, I was in my 20s and I thought, maybe I should be doing it like he's doing it. And I did that and I almost passed out. I became dizzy and I was not relaxed. And that's what the exercise was supposed to produce. So once I figured out his breathing's not working for me, I went into my perfect breathing pattern, which was lighter, softer, not so quite intense, and I instantly relaxed. And that set up a lot of questioning in my mind because so many meditators, so many yoga teachers talk about deep breathing, breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, or the other way around. So please tell us how you recognize good breathing and what you teach about this.
So physiological normal breathing, breathing the way nature intended in its perfect design, to keep us healthy, looks very different from what you described, which the person next to you was doing in that particular session. So perfect breathing is in through the nose and out through the nose all day, all night, and even when running a marathon. Now you can't, people listening to this don't want to go out and try that now. You have to be able to breathe correctly at rest, automatically, during the day, during your sleep, in order to transfer that into exercise. So that may seem impossible now, but when the baseline is right, that is possible. So nasal breathing, that's how we were designed. There's many properties of the nose that promote health in many ways, including filtering out pollution, chemicals, depending on the type of them, of course,
And allergens.
germs, bacteria, pollen, all sorts of things in the atmosphere. So the nose is a wonderful filter. It hydrates the air. It warms the air as well. So that's the perfect design of the body. Perfect breathing is silent during the day, during the night, and this is what you noticed during that session, that the other person was having very noisy breathing. And perfect breathing is actually silent during the night as well, and less noisy when exercising compared to people who use mouth breathing and inefficient breathing. So silent and nasal, it is diaphragmatic rather than upper chest. And it is a very small movement of the diaphragm area. And the diaphragm area is at the solar plexus. And this is something that many people get wrong because of many breathing techniques out there, especially in the breathwork sphere, which I don't call my work breathwork. It's breathing retraining. It's teaching people normal physiological breathing, their day-to-day breathing, not for special effects they want to get. It is just a very tiny movement at the solar plexus. In fact, your breathing should be invisible unless you had your shirt off, and then you may see that small movement around the solar plexus. You shouldn't be able to look at someone and see the shoulders going up and down and the chest moving, or the stomach going in and out. That's a very small, soft movement. The breath size is relatively small. At rest, we should only use 1/8 of our lung capacity. So a normal breath size is 500 mil. I think that's, I'm not sure what the conversion is. It's probably about a pint in your language for volume, a pint of air per breath. Whereas the lungs, they can actually hold 4 liters of air, which is about 8 pints, I think. So, the 500 mil size breath is only about 1/8 of the whole capacity we've got for our lungs. So when someone is doing a big fill and an empty breath, that is not physiological normal for someone sitting in a chair. All that extra capacity is there for when you're running up a hill or doing something, really, really strenuous in exercise, that spare capacity. So that's part of what makes it invisible, the gentleness of it. And it's relatively slow. We should breathe between 8 and 12 breaths per minute. The average person I saw over, 30 years of assessing their breathing was breathing 17 breaths a minute. Between 17 and about 24 was the usual that people would be the first time I ever assessed their breathing. And they had no idea. Checking breathing rate is not part of standard medical assessment, at least in Australia. So it's missed. It's often subtle that you can't always pick up on this. Breathing is also very smooth and regular. It's not interspersed with a yawn, every now and again, or a repetitive sighing. I always remember a case of I asked a mother, the daughter yawned a lot, and I said, can you just count how many yawns approximately she does per day? And the mother actually did it all day long. I was expecting her to get the number in an hour and then multiply it. And the little girl was yawning 165 times a day. Now that is an extraordinary, because a yawn can be about 2 litres size in air, 500 mil, quarter of that is normal breath size. And this mucks up the balance between the blood gases. So the breathing should be regular and in control and comfortable all the time.
So what causes people to yawn?
Usually yawning will follow a situation of stress, or because sometimes when people are stressed, they actually hold their breath. And they're not used to doing that. And then the body wants all that air again. And so it's like a reflex, and they will do a really large sigh or yawn after that. So a very disturbed function of the breathing. No one's ever really sure, why yawns you copy them off someone else. There's never been a really clear explanation for that. And it's okay to have a yawn, of an evening, and it usually means it's time to go to bed, but not have your day interspersed with yawning or sighing or real gasping breaths. And particularly people with disturbed breathing will have a very gasping inhale when they start a new sentence or a new phrase. You can pick it up there.
And so if you see a baby, I have a new grandson, and every once in a while I hear him just every once in a while doing the, it's a choppy inhale or a choppy exhale. Almost like when somebody has cried really, really hard and then they have
Yes.
that. Okay. So he's just a little tiny baby, and it caused me to think about that, why he's doing that at this age.
So my first question would be, was that there right from birth, or is it happening now? So is it a change? And also what's happened in that period of change? For example, an overly heated bedroom for children can affect their breathing. They can develop a sort of a panting, an increased, like dogs when they've been overheated will pant. That's a way of releasing heat from the body. So children, if they're suffering from being too hot, or if it's a change in diet. Now, with one as young as your grandson, I presume there's no change in diet. Could be a change in the mother's diet.
Interesting.
Okay, so just looking for, if there's been a change, if it wasn't always like that, what's different?
Yeah, interesting.
Something in the environment. But if the rest of the time the breathing is silent and just, newborn babies are meant to breathe perfectly. So it's a great opportunity to look at what the perfect form looks like, how nature intended us to breathe, and then compare that to a grown-up. So I'll pick on a snorer in this case because it can be quite classic. So what I'm saying is that perfect breathing should be 500 mils per breath. This is approximate 10 breaths a minute. That's the middle of the 8 to 12 range, which will give you 5 litres of air per minute. Now, if you look at the old textbooks, that was always what they said was normal physiological breathing for perfect function of the body, perfect balance of the blood gases, 5 litres per minute to be breathed. Now, The average person today, and this has been tested a few times, including the research I was involved in, the average person today is breathing 12 litres per minute, and they're called the average modern person, meaning a healthy person, supposedly, in inverted commas, 12 litres per minute. Now, we haven't evolved that much from the 1970s when I studied, and that's what my textbook said, and people were actually a lot healthier back then. 5 litres per normal is, but now they're finding the average person is breathing 12 litres per. So they're basically normalising chronic over-breathing, breathing too much. So a great example of that is a snorer. So if you have the opportunity, and always ask permission first, or maybe you've already experienced it, observing a snorer during sleep, and you can even find on YouTube, often it's children who did videos of a parent snoring, and with sleep apnea as well, where their breathing stops. Or if you live with someone like that, if you get permission first, but put your hand near their mouth when they're asleep, because they're usually snoring through the mouth, but you can do it through the nose, and just feel the rush of air on your hand. If you've got the opportunity to check someone with silent, invisible breathing when they're asleep, you will only get a sensation of warmth when you put the hand near the face. But with a snorer, you will feel a big rush of air. So what's the difference between someone sleeping quietly and restfully and waking up full of beans and energy and focus compared to a snorer is the volume of air they're breathing. So during snoring, it can get up to about 15, even up to 22 litres per minute in my observations in sleep clinics. So it's a huge volume of air going in and out during the night. And we know that snoring is associated with so many disturbances in physiology, high blood pressure, heart conditions, fatigue, obviously, as well. Destroying relationships as well.
How do you train them out of that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because one of the myths around breathing is that that you can't change your breathing when you're asleep. But the same mechanism controls our breathing when we're awake as controls it when we're asleep. So it's a part of the brain in the medulla. It's called the breathing center. It actually drives our breathing from carbon dioxide levels in the blood. Now, our carbon dioxide levels should be up between 40 and 45 millimeters mercury measure all the time to keep our body in balance and to allow the oxygenation process. And there's another myth about breathing, is that carbon dioxide is the bad guy and the lower it is, the better. So it's carbon dioxide levels that actually drive our breathing. So when you've been chronically breathing too much air, by breathing through the mouth, it's a much bigger hole than the nose, or by breathing too fast, and it's usually breathing through the mouth, a bigger hole, too fast, too deep, as in too big in volume, and also adding in repetitive sighing, yawning, coughing, clearing the throat, gasping respiration during talking, you've acclimatized to a higher volume of air, so the 12 litres that's now average, and also to a lower level of carbon dioxide. So you've actually changed the set point in your brain that drives your breathing. So it's still automatic. You're not doing it on purpose, but although that can be exaggerated by doing a lot of deep breathing exercises. So you now change the setting in the brain. And so what we do is make people aware of that. So first of all, the first thing I do is history to find out the cause, which we just discussed in the situation with your grandson, looking changes. When did your problem start? What was going on then? What did you notice? And building this picture, and then assessing breathing pattern right in front of me, then getting feedback on what's happening at night. And then that's that aha moment, that the breathing, invariably with over 6,000 people, there's never been an exception. Anyone with breathing related condition has been chronically over-breathing, and it's often very subtle. So having identified that, we work on it during the day, and the number one thing is their awareness. You can't get this happening without awareness of how you're breathing compared to normal. and then you change it during the day, it reconditions the setting in the brain. And Professor Buteyko called his method, in the Russian version of the language, breathing reconditioning, because you are reconditioning the setting in the brain. So you gradually take that back to normal through the changes that you make. And that's why improving it during the day improves it at night. And many people, I've heard this so many times, countless times, will say after that first night after their first session, that they've had their best sleep in decades.
Yeah,
okay? And that means, they're not completely right then, but their breathing center in the brain has already adapted and be very fast if it's done correctly.
And this prevents some people from having to do the CPAP, the sleep apnea machine.
Yeah, if they're already at the stage where they've got a CPAP machine, then there's quite a bit of unwinding to do and conditioning. But yes, but that takes time. But they change their breathing during the day first, and then what they find is that eventually the pressure of the CPAP machine becomes too much for them, because that was prescribed at a time when they had chronic overbreathing. It's really interesting with the CPAP machine, because people see that as continuously, CPAP stands for continuous positive airway pressure, that they're wearing that. So, and that was prescribed because they're having periods of apnea. Okay, so it's treating the apnea. So instead of stopping breathing during the night, the air is going to continuously come in. But when the CPAP machine is applied, continuous positive airway pressure, that means when you raise the pressure of air, you decrease the volume. So when people are on CPAP, they breathe less air. Yet we have this myth that it's all the
opposite than what we would think. Yeah.
Yeah, the deeper the breathing, the better, is myth number one. I'm sorry, carbon dioxide being the bad guy is myth number one, that we should have a carbon dioxide as low as possible. And yet, so it's primary regulator of breathing. And that it's all about oxygen, the more the better. But when the CPAP machine's applied, air under pressure, the volume is less, their carbon dioxide level is then higher, they're washing less carbon dioxide out because they breathe less volume. And so, when they wake up in the morning, their CO2 level is higher. But it's not retraining their control of their own breathing. So CPAP machine goes off during the day, and then they go back to their habits of mouth breathing, fast breathing, large breathing, and they need to put the CPAP on again. So what we do is we work with the breathing during the day, and then at night, they should have less need of the CPAP. So eventually the CPAP becomes a bit confronting to people. But if they actually, up to 50% of people don't tolerate the CPAP after a month. They will give up on it. And that depends, it can be quite confronting to be forced to breathe in a certain way when you're going to spend your day breathing in a different way. So for those people, CPAP is not a solution. But for those on it, yes, but you've got to work with the breathing during the day to get that result.
So how do you think the bad habits of breathing are starting and are so prevalent? What do you think is causing that?
The lack of awareness around breathing, where it's accepted as automatic, and no one really takes, basically if someone collapses in the street, the first thing they do is breathing or not. Okay, they're breathing. All right, we'll look at what's wrong, broken leg or whatever. So if you're breathing, yes, we're going to take our focus away from your breathing and look at what's going on the rest of the body. And not much interest in how you're breathing compared to normal. So, that's one thing, that lack of awareness around breathing. And back in I think it was the 1930s in Europe, apparently it was a social bad habit to be a mouth breather. And I've been told that people who were chronic mouth breathers weren't invited out in other people's homes. And now we've got such a huge percentage of children chronically mouth breathe, and mouth open all night. Actually changes the structure of their faces. And so no one tries to reinforce nasal breathing anymore, whereas it used to be with children that they were told to breathe through their nose. The other thing is all the influences in our life that make us breathe up. So when you are stressed, frightened, under attack, for example, we should breathe more air. We go into that sympathetic response state of the nervous system. And that's a really good thing to do. Like if a lion came rushing in the room now, I might even take a big breath through my mouth, I'm not sure, and I would run. I would have all this adrenaline coursing through me, and I would fight the lion, or more likely run very fast. And then after I was safe, I would bring my breathing back to normal, and I would have all that focus that I should have. So it's a normal response of the body, but people are in that sort of, it's like having their foot on the accelerator all the time. When you overbreathe, breathe too much constantly, you don't even know you're doing it. It's like resting your foot on the accelerator all the time, and it's tiring. You can't get to a state of relaxation when you're like that. You're always slightly on edge, and you're trigger happy. The slightest disturbance in your environment, and you can go out of that. Whereas carbon dioxide levels facilitate the parasympathetic response, the relaxation response. So the higher carbon dioxide levels are within normal range, they have an upper limit, of course, the more relaxed and focused you'll be. So what's disturbing us in our environment? The amount of stress in our environment, the go, go, go time of life we're living in. Also, what's going on all around the world. And keeping your breathing calm during all that can allow you to sit and stay in control of yourself no matter what is going on out there in the environment. There are other disturbances. There's also a processed food diet. Those are inflammatory foods, and they increase the breathing rate. So a lot of children who develop poor breathing habits can be traced back to the diet that they're on, and that's another thing that I do in that initial assessment.
Okay, hold right there, because I don't think many people would link diet with breathing, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And breathing is always thought of as the symptom that's showing. Your tonsils are swollen, your adenoids are swollen, let's take them out. So why are the adenoids and tonsils swollen? Was that they will be breathing more and having trouble breathing because they're all so blocked up and congested in the nose. But if you look at the breathing pattern, they are over breathing almost, well, in all cases I've seen, can't say always, but it's very common. And so as soon as you calm that breathing down, that may mean taking out some of the inflammatory foods from the diet will help bring the breathing down, but it's awareness as well. Then the amount of pollens and whatever in the environment going through the nose goes down. Just the physical amount of air that you're taking in through your nose goes down. So the tissues aren't so swollen and inflamed and dried out. And then therefore the nose is functioning better, and therefore you're comfortable breathing through your nose again when you wind that back. So that is treating an underlying cause, the work we do with breathing.
I have a question here.
So many things.
Should the amount of air you inhale match what you exhale? Should they be equal?
Yes, they are. In ideal breathing, then the inhale is slightly shorter than the exhale, right? But you don't ever practice that. That just comes when you write all the other things going on with the posture, etc., with the breathing. That's the rhythm settled into. It's a slightly shorter inhale, a slightly longer exhale, and a little pause at the end of the breath. Okay, but that is achieved naturally, not through coaching. So I never coach people. Breathe in over 2 or 3, hold out over so many, hold. Never do what I call timed breathing. When you fix
never worked for me. I've done meditations like that or experienced that in yoga. It never worked for me. Made me very uncomfortable instantly. And I thought I was doing something wrong. And it's like, why doesn't it work for me? But it works for others. This is really good to hear.
Yeah. So the teacher will, there with a class, the rhythm that she has will suit some people and it will disturb other people.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is their baseline breathing. They've all got different baseline breathings. As a breathing educator, I assess every person individually before they come to a class for their baseline. So I know what it is. And then give instructions without timing in them. So they just bring themselves back to a normal baseline from that. So you can't give a general timed instruction with breathing without having at least a couple of people in the class being upset by it. So any pranayama practice or training in Wim Hof method, a form of breath work, some people will be absolutely fine with the style of breathing being taught, and others will be uncomfortable. I've witnessed people in yoga classes going into panic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Not with me running the class, but just being there and observing. I've actually done a lot of work with yoga teachers, and they've asked me to come and assess the way they teach breathing. And by changing the way they guide people in breathing, then everyone can have a good result with it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, because back when I was pregnant with my daughter, I attended a Lamaze class.
Mm-hmm.
And they taught the extreme exhale and the particular breathing technique. And I don't even recall what it is at this moment, but it even during the class, all my indicator muscles, everything within me said, nope, that's not going to work for me. That's the
Mm.
Maverick path, to question authority,
Yes.
And I didn't do it when I gave
Yeah.
birth.
Yeah, it's
You
interesting,
know,
Kathy. Like, I think you're possibly the only person I've heard say that, obviously, a
mm,
Maverick. Yeah, I question everything. Yeah,
mhm.
it's, as I say, it's only going to suit a
Yeah.
subset of people in there.
Yeah, well, part of being a maverick is to connect with your own authenticity and to trust your experience as opposed to only listening to authority. The
Mm,
maverick personality is designed to question authority. Not that all authority is bad, but to question and say, does that work for me? As opposed to authority bias, which is going to believe everything an authority figure says.
mm,
And I was the only person in that Lamaze class that, first of all, said, I'm not going to do an epidural. And this breathing makes me uncomfortable. And they all looked at me like I was from another planet, which maybe I am. I don't know.
mm,
But the point is, I ended up, when you give birth, especially when you're unmedicated, you do have some breathing changes when you're in the middle of a really hard contraction, like you said.
mm,
If a lion comes in and chases you, you're not in fight or flight, but you are in a survival moment when you're giving birth. But then my breathing went back to normal very instantly and quickly,
mm,
and I gave birth very easily. And I think that is something important to talk about. You mentioned too a second ago about posture, and I think we have to talk about posture because I believe that's very, very connected to good breathing.
mm. Yeah. Would you be happy for me to share a little way of becoming aware of breathing for
Oh, absolutely.
the
Any
people
tips you
listening?
can, practical tips, we
Yeah,
love them.
yeah. So this is an awareness tip. I mean, I've already talked a lot about what good breathing looks and feels like. So if we just at this point pause, and this is not appropriate for anyone who's listening to this podcast while they're driving. So replay it when you're home. But anyone who's sitting in a safe place and sitting at this moment, close your eyes if you feel better doing this, or leave them open. But just tune in with your breathing. Don't try and change it or analyze it. You may have already been doing that. So I just want you to sense at this moment whether you are breathing comfortably through in and out your nose, or whether it is in the nose, out the mouth, or through the mouth. Don't try and change anything. Just become aware of your breathing, become aware of any sound to it, of your current comfort level with your breathing. I mean, you may have a blocked nose, just note that. And go back to breathing through the mouth if that's what you were doing. Sense it. And now I want you to notice which parts of your body are moving when you breathe. Where can you feel the movement? Can you feel the movement in the shoulders, the collarbone area? Can you feel the movement against the back of the chair? Can you feel it in your upper chest, your breastbone area, the sternum, or around the solar plexus area? Is that where the predominant movement is? Or is it down lower, closer to the navel? Or is it all of those bits moving? Just find out where the dominant movement is and how many places that you can feel the movement. Don't try and change anything. Just become aware. Okay, so once you've identified the location of breathing, any sound to it, and the comfort level of it, I want you, without moving your body at all, so make sure you don't move, I want you to put your little finger in your navel or over where your navel is, and your thumb right at the end of your breastbone, so where it changes from bony area to soft. And that's called the handspan test. Now, when you have good breathing and good posture, there will be a full span between the navel and the end of the breastbone. I'm doing it now here, but you can't see it. But basically going from here to here. Mm-hmm. But if you are folded over it and those 2 points are closer together, more like that, thumb and in here, then you are collapsed over the diaphragm area and hunched. And many people, when they've, we've been talking now for half an hour or so, will have relaxed if they're sitting listening to this, and into their default sitting position, which might be how they sit for most of the day if they've got an office job, or hours watching TV, or driving the car is another place where they're folded over this area. So I call it being folded over when you don't have that handspan distance there. Mm-hmm. And that really interferes with the efficiency of the diaphragm. So you should not need, these are the emergency muscles up here. They're moving a little bit, the muscle between the ribs with breathing, but they're not the major muscles of breathing. It's a diaphragm. It's very, very powerful muscle, as is the uterus. It's got a job to do, and they're perfectly capable of doing it all by themselves if we just get out of the way, take that sort of inappropriate control out of them. But if you're folded over like that, then you will not have really efficient diaphragm movement. If we're going to rely more upon upper chest movement. But there's also a connection between your nose and your diaphragm. Nasal breathing and diaphragm breathing both facilitate the parasympathetic state, the rest and digest, and the focus and relaxation and calm that we need. Mm-hmm. So if you're folded over the diaphragm, inefficient, particularly if you add mouth breathing to it, you're just way off being as efficient as you can be. And this is more, as I said, that having that foot on the accelerator all the time. Mm-hmm. So if you're still there in that position now, lift, straighten, unfold that distance between the diaphragm, and then try and sit. Usually you need to tilt your pelvis to do this so that your pelvis tilts a little bit, and you feel the contact point with the chair is the sit bones, the two bony knobs called ischial tuberosities in the pelvis. So you should take your weight down through the sit bones. And I don't have my back against the chair. I generally perch on the edge of chairs, and I can do that for hours and hours and hours because our body is perfectly designed to do that.
I do that too. Yeah.
Yeah, rather than leaning back in a chair. Very rarely are chairs ever designed perfectly for good posture and good breathing. Mm-hmm. I managed to find some in my clinic. I had 20 of them, and they were perfect. But eventually people don't need the back of the chair anymore either. So you drop those pelvic bones down, the sit bones down into the chair, and you lift your body upwards. Mm-hmm. I get people to imagine they've got a coat hanger within the head. So the hook part in the head, the shoulder part in here, and it's hung on a railing up there, the perfect height for you. And so it's taking your weight, and you drop your weight down into the sit bones on the chair. You get a sense of where they are. If you're standing, you're dropping your weight down through your feet, all the feet, the front and the back, into the floor. And at the same time, you are softening, letting go, and lengthening in the two directions. That makes an immediate change to breathing without us saying breathe in any certain way, is to get that relaxed, upright posture. When I wrote the book, both books, and broke breathing changes down into the 9 habits of healthy breathing, number 1 was awareness. And over the time I wrote the book, which took 7 years for the first one, because I was trying to work at the same time, number 2 in the book is nose breathing, and number 3 is posture. And when I was writing the book, I kept switching them around. Which one should we do first, 2 or 3? In a way, I wish I'd actually put posture there in the number 2 position. But then we're not always sitting in a chair to even think about it. So it is just so important. So if you adjust that posture, many people will notice straight away their nose will start to clear.
Let's talk about your 2 books. We haven't mentioned them. So Tess has written 2 books. One addresses anxiety and stress issues and breathing, and the other one is about snoring and sleep apnea and breathing. And they're available on Amazon. What are the titles of the 2 specifically?
They're Relief from Snoring and Sleep Apnea, a step-by-step guide to changing the way to better sleep and better health through changing the way you breathe. The other one is Anxiety and Panic, Relief from Anxiety and Panic by changing the way you breathe. But both books cover all breathing related conditions. So they cover asthma, they cover asthma, COPD.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Chronic nasal problems, chronic mouth breathing, reduced exercise capacity, any of the breathing related conditions covered both in both books, but sort of a greater focus on understanding CPAP machines and things like that in the sleep book, and a greater focus and a slower program in the anxiety and panic book to take things a little bit more slowly in there. But there's a huge overlap between the 2 books, and all those other conditions are covered in there.
Yeah, many times for anxiety, people are holding their breath.
Yes.
They just stop and they paralyze and it all clenches up. And then when they realize it, then they have to take a big, deep breath and their whole chest moves because they've stopped breathing. And so you're saying develop the habit of keeping it regular and light and equal so that you don't get to that point.
Professor Buteyko called the body's natural tendency to stop the breathing at times as a defense mechanism. So a good example is asthma. And overbreathing it's the most common overriding dysfunction. If we add together the mouth breathing, the high volume breathing, the faster breathing, the use of so much of the chest rather than just the solar plexus, leading to breathing, say, 12 litres of air. The average asthmatic breathes 12 litres of air. The person with sleep apnea is breathing 15 litres of air. This is during the day. And at night, they've got stopping breathing. Wow. It's a compensation. Now, when the carbon dioxide level goes too low because of all this washing out of carbon dioxide with the high breathing rate, when it gets critically low, people with these conditions have all got lower carbon dioxide than is ideal, but give them a bit of stress. So for an asthmatic, it might be laughing. It might be something that makes the breathing come up even more. They might be feeling okay, but then they laugh or they exercise, they lose a bit more carbon dioxide, it gets critically low, the airways close, saying, stop breathing so much. Your CO2 is too low. I'm going to restrict your breathing for a while. It's the body talking to you. And then when the carbon dioxide comes back to their level, not normal yet, their level or high, well, yes, it will come up even higher. Carbon dioxide is a bronchodilator. The airways will open up. It's a natural mechanism of the body. When someone having a panic attack, someone with chronic anxiety is breathing about 12 litres of air per minute. When they have a panic attack, it goes up even higher and people notice it. And then they feel like they can't breathe. and their body is actually trying to build up some carbon dioxide by restricting the breathing. The old treatment for panic attack was to breathe into a paper bag to rebreathe carbon dioxide, which basically sedates the nervous system, calms you down. It's like a sedative, right? And you don't want to leave the paper bag on too long for that reason either. And so when you see people, talking, they say, oh, stop breathing during the day or stop breathing at night. That's the problem. I always look at, what were you doing before you did that? I was really stressed at work and trying to get something done, and I find I'm not breathing. So the problem, the cause is their breathing getting out of control, too big first. And the thing that they're worried about, which is what the CPAP addresses, is the not breathing. But if you fix what's going on before you stop breathing, then your body has no need to bring in these mechanisms. So back to asthma, carbon dioxide is a bronchodilator. That's been known in physiology for probably close to 100 years now. I'm not sure when it was first discovered that carbon dioxide was a bronchodilator. It opens your airways up. Now we've got all these medications to use for asthma, but the body had a mechanism to keep your airways functioning beforehand. So this is where, Professor Buteyko, as I say, a mechanic before he became a doctor. He was a mechanic during the Second World War, before he trained in medicine. Had this way of thinking, well, why is this happening? What's the underlying cause? Let's address that.
What's broken so we can fix it?
Yeah. And of course, that appealed so much to me. When I read something about his works, they took me 7 years to find. It was like, bing, light bulb going on. If I'd had his sort of brain, I probably would have worked it out myself. But I had stopped teaching deep breathing exercises to people when it was going to cause a reaction. I stopped that before as a physio student. Even I noticed it then. I never wanted to induce anything negative in anyone.
Well, this is great work that you're doing. And don't you have a course also? Is your course available?
Yes, yeah. So in an effort to retire, because there's so few people doing this work, there's lots of like shortcut versions of it, but the core understanding is just not out there. So I wrote the 2 books first so that something was available for people for the basics before they go and find a breathing technique that they want to practice. And then through the encouragement of a friend who, you were talking about childbirth, my very, very close friend here encouraged me to do the course, and she introduces it there. She used to teach what was called calm birth, and now she calls it transform birth. So she changed the way she taught the breathing during childbirth education classes. So with her encouragement, and together we created the online course called Breathe Away.
And your website is breathability.com, correct?
Yes.
And you go to the website and you can find the course there, Breathe Away.
The course is there. There's also a summary of the books. All the chapters are listed there. On the website is also the frequently asked questions, which I know, hopefully I've covered quite a lot of them here that come up all the time. There's frequently asked questions are there that can be really, really helpful if you want to learn anything more about it, to see the way the books are laid out, the way the course is laid out. So they're both basically a template of the breathing classes that I ran for 30 years. Starting off with that assessment and that awareness in the beginning. You must start there in order for it to be a really easy, smooth process. The whole process should be completely comfortable, not cause any negative reaction as well. And it's done step by step in all the 2 books and the online course. The online course has got the benefits of the visual. I'm standing there teaching. I'm using a whiteboard, and also talking through the breathing exercises and the audios that are built into there.
This is very important work, especially just the concept of over breathing. I guarantee you, well, I can't guarantee anything, but I suspect the majority of the people listening have never heard about over breathing. We are trained to think we are under breathing, And you've just
Mm.
introduced the opposite concept, and I think that's
Yeah.
fascinating. So, Tess, thank you so much for coming on board and sharing all of this beautiful information. And I invite the listeners or people watching on YouTube to check out your website, check out your books or your course. This is very
Mm.
important work.
Yeah. And I'd like to wish them all, a metamorphosis, a transformation in their own health and well-being for every breath they take.
Yes. Thank you so much. Okay.